Now this video is going to be a bit different. Now oftentimes I get questions asking me what a certain tool is that I'm using, and I always respond and try to the best of my knowledge to help them out. Instead of responding in individual questions, I may as well make a video on all the tools that I use. Now keep in mind, I'm just a hobbyist. I do this for fun. It's not really, I don't make much money off this. So I don't have all the super high-end professional tools. I don't have a shop for this stuff. It's just me in my house doing this for fun. Now also, I bought a lot of these tools years ago, so I don't really remember exactly how much I paid for it. Plus prices have also changed, and model numbers might have changed on like certain stations and certain things. So I'll try to the best of my knowledge, remember everything and post down below in the description a link to each individual tool that I have. Now in the interest of full disclosure, all the Amazon links down below, they'll be affiliate links. So if you do use those links, I'll make a small commission. Now I don't actually take any direct donations. I don't have a PayPal link. I don't have a Patreon or Cash App links. None of that. So if you do want to support, that's probably the best way to do it. Thanks. Now let's get on to the video. Okay, so first tool here on deck. This is a soldering station. This is a Kisker 2-in-1. Now I bought this years ago. I think it set me back about 180 off AliExpress. Now it has a nice little premium the soldering handle, and it has T12 style tips. Now I'll get into the tips a little later in this video and the T12 style a little later in this video. I'm just going to showcase a few stations that I have. Now this one also comes with hot air rework. So it's 2-in-1. You can regulate. It has a lot of controls. You can turn them on and off with these buttons, and it has little like rotary controls on the back. See what I like about this one is if I want to swap out the hot air nozzle, I can just remove it from the back here, unscrew it, and then remove it and replace it. Same thing for the handle. I could just unscrew it and pull it out and replace both. And yeah, this is a pretty good unit, but I actually don't recommend this one because even though it's a 2-in-1, it's just a luxury. You can actually get a hot air station for like 40-50 bucks, and you could also get a T12 style station for about 50-60 bucks. So I paid quite the premium for this just to have the convenience of everything all in one. But yeah, if you're wondering, yeah, this is the one I use the most. So here's another T12 style station. This is a different brand. I think this one set me back like 90 bucks, 80 or $90. Now it has two soldering handles. Now you really don't need two soldering handles. This is just another luxury for me, and I wanted to test the quality. I wanted to see how much of a difference this one was compared to the other stations that I have. So I bought this just as like a little novelty, and it works well. It also has T12 style handles, which all my irons that I personally use have T12 style handles. It comes with two what do you call this, like resting stations, or like handles, whatever, resting stations, and they're both the same. It has a spot on on both of them to store your extra T12 irons. And yeah, this is not another one that I don't recommend because you're paying another premium for a luxury that you really don't need. But it is something I use. I was using this for quite a bit, this station quite a bit. A couple of years back, I think before I stopped making videos, I was using one of these stations. I think it was this station. But it also comes with this little silicone pad that you can use when the iron's hot to pull out the irons. And yeah, and once again, you could also remove, if you want to replace the iron, if the iron is damaged, you could just easily remove it and buy another hand piece. So yeah, this one, another one I don't recommend, but I do own. It works well though. Now here's a soldering station I do recommend. If you're getting into soldering, just a simple station like this, the KSGR. This one has a brushed aluminum faceplate, but there are different brands. different models that have all black, a different style construction. They're from the same brand, and this one I think was 65 at the time, 60 or 65. I paid for this off of Amazon, and it didn't come with this piece here. I had to buy this separate. The resting station. So keep in mind it was just the hand piece. I think 3 or 4 different T12 tips, and the station. Now a lot of these irons, I think all of them don't come with the power cord, the power cable. So you will have to order that yourself. So just keep that in mind. If you buy these stations, make sure you have these cords. Now they're relatively common. A lot of electronics today use this, so you should have multiple in your house. But yeah, this is a nice station that I recommend. In fact, if you're looking for a station to order, anything that's T12, that it's gonna be your go-to. Even if you want to see, you can get a higher end one, like a Hakko brand higher end T12 station, but that is gonna set you back maybe $250, $300 for the T12 Hakko station. And like a station like this, you can get for 50, 60 bucks, and it's a fraction of the price of a Hakko station. Now, what I don't like, or I don't like, it's not that I don't like it, but I tend to disagree. There are many people that recommend the Hakko, the 888D station, and the reason why I don't like that station is it's relatively expensive. I think at the time, years ago, when I was getting into the repairs, it was a $100 station. I think since then, it has gotten a little more expensive, and it's still using the old style handles. It's using old style technology. Now, what I mean by that is, instead of having just a replaceable tip, now if this tip burns out, you easily replace it. Now these don't last forever, but they last a good while. Like you can use one of these tips for years before they burn out. And they're only between, like a knockoff T12 tip, it's like $3 to $5. So they're not expensive at all, and you don't have to replace the handpiece. Now with the Hakko, these don't take any time to heat up. You turn them on at 3-4 seconds. They're at the temperature that you set, ready to go. Now the old style technology ones, it's like a metal plate, a metal piece, a metal tip over a heating element. Now you got to wait for the heating element to transfer the heat to the tip, and then you're ready to go, which takes maybe 15 seconds. So you're paying a premium price for a luxury brand, and you're not getting better performance, if that makes sense. So I always tend to stay away from that Hakko station, the entry level one, where I'm sure it's a good station, it'll last forever, but it's just, why pay more for something that's, in my opinion, could be, you could get something, I don't know, I don't want to say inferior, but you could get something that I prefer to be superior than the Hakko style. And I know a lot of people disagree with me, and that's okay, but just this is all personal preference to me, so I don't want to really ruffle any feathers that the Hakko station is terrible. If you own that station, I'm sure it works well for you, but I prefer these T12 style stations instead. Okay, so here's another 2-in-1 station that I really don't recommend either. So I bought this one after I had bought the previous station that I showed in this video, because I needed a hot air rework station. So instead of just buying the standalone hot air rework station, I went with this, which this works well. As a hot air rework station is great, and this only was about maybe 50, 60 bucks. You can get the hot air rework station for less money. But I figured, okay, let me get an iron with it too, and if anything, I'll just remove the hot iron, which you can. You can remove the soldering iron and just use it as a standalone hot air rework station. And that's what I was using for a while, because this handle is the old school style tip that I can show you right now. To remove it, now imagine if this is piping hot and you need to remove the tip. You have to unscrew this with a silicone pad or something, then you remove that, and there's the heating element. So that heating element has to heat up, transfer the heat to the tip, and then the tip eventually gets hot enough to solder, and that could take, for this iron, it takes like 20 seconds before I can start soldering rather. So yeah, I don't really recommend this style. This is the I prefer the T12 style. It was just easier to replace. Tips are cheap, and if the heating element burns on this, you got to replace the heating element or the handle. If the heating element burns out of a T12 tip, you just replace this $3 to $5. So yeah, but in the interest of full disclosure, I do own this station. It works well. It's just not my preferred method of soldering. You'll never see me use this in videos. Never. Not this. And probably not this station at all either, because my main station has a hot air nozzle, so I don't need this at all. This is just a backup if the other one never fails. Now here's a tool that everybody asks what it is. What tool is this? And this is the Hakko FR301. Now I bought this off Amazon maybe in 2019, and I think it was, at the time, I think it was $250 or $260. I think it's a little more expensive now. But yeah, this is one of my favorite tools. It works really well. It's easy to clean and service. You pull out the cartridge, you open this, the little canister, and you can just dump out the excess, the spent solder that's in there. I don't want to do that now and make a mess on the table, but I do have to clean that. You could also replace the felt tips here, which this one seems to be falling apart already. And yeah, it's super easy to work with. You have to maintain it quite often. And by maintaining, meaning the nozzle will get stuck, something will clog in here, and in order to clear that, they send you a special little like rod, and it's like a thing you just insert in the tip and you push it all the way through while it's hot, and it clears any obstruction, and then you're back in business. So yeah, you got to do that quite often, but this is one of my favorite tools. It makes the job so much easier, and I highly recommend, even though this is an expensive tool, if you're going to do this as a hobby, then yeah, this is a highly recommended tool. So yeah, there's nothing really more to say about it. It's the Hakko FR301. Okay, one more thing before if you order this off Amazon, or if wherever you order this, make sure that it's the North American one, because the North American one is rated at 120 volts for 140 watts, and the plug has the ground. Because there's the Japanese model out there which works, but it's only for I think 100 volts or 90 volts, and it only does 95 watts. I think it's 100 volts at 95 watts. So it could be incompatible with the US standard. So just keep that in mind. I have to clean it. It's kind of dirty, flux all over it. But it works really well. So this tool here is a bench power supply. It works really well. I don't use it much, but a couple of videos ago, like last year or a few years ago, I was using this to test some Super Nintendo boards that were missing voltage regulators, and it works really well. You can dial in your voltage and the current, and it's pretty robust. It seems well built, and but I don't use this that often, but I do use it. I don't remember where I got it and how much I paid for it. I think I bought it off AliExpress, but I don't actually remember how much I paid for it. So if I could find it again, I'll link it in the description as well, and you can just click on it and see how much I paid. I don't remember actually though. So yeah, I know that most of these Chinese tools, these things you could get off AliExpress, they change the name on the top here, but they're all, as you can see from the construction, they're all really similar. And I think they just changed the faceplate. A lot of different companies, they sell the same tool, same things. They just change little things here and there. So next up here is a multimeter. This is the one I like to use. I think I bought this off Amazon about maybe 6 years ago, and it was $28, I think. Now this, I'm sure I've seen this style, the same thing, orange construction with the like gray interior with the rotary wheel, same thing, but this brand up here was different. So these things come in different brands, but it's all relatively the same. Now here's another thing to note: these leads, they're aftermarket leads. They're not the ones that came with this unit. because I think after 18 months or so, or 2 years, there was a short at one of the leads, so I had to replace it. But yeah, you could always pop them out and replace it. They're just standard. And the ones I have, they've been lasted ever since. And this is a tool that I highly recommend. If you're going to do repairs, you definitely need a multimeter. This will save you so much time. So yeah, this is one of the higher recommended tools. Okay, now I'm going to show you some T12 tips. They all come in special styles. This is a KU. In fact, this is one of the better tips that I use. It's like a knife edge, still sealed. I got a whole bunch of these. This one is a D16. They're relatively cheap, between $3 and $5. So if you ever, here's another KU. I have spares of that one. A BC2. You could get these everywhere, Amazon, AliExpress. And as long as they're T12, they'll be compatible with any T12 style station. And yeah, I got a few of them. Here's a loose one. And they're all, you know, it's kind of far, kind of hard to see. But yeah, this is why I highly recommend. There's so many different style tips for your needs. ILS if you prefer that. And K, this is the same style, just a larger, has a larger tip. Same style as a KU. So yeah, that's that. This is the tips. Okay, so let's get into solder. Now this is the spool, my original spool that I bought all those years. So this will last you literally years. So I think I paid $37. These go for about $35, $40 for a spool. And this is Kester, 40% tin, 60% tin, 40% lead. And yeah, it's I think 0.8 millimeters, or 0.8 millimeter diameter. And this is, I haven't gotten a chance to use it yet. It's still relatively new. And it's the same thing, except it has 2% silver in it. So I suspect this will be superior. So when I run out of this, I'm gonna move on to this one. Same thing, except has silver. So the joints should be nicer, shinier. Now this is, I think, currently a $90 roll. I think I spent at the time $60. So I paid twice as much as this spool, but now it's really gone up in price. So I don't recommend going extra. If you're just doing this as a hobby, get this spool. Yeah, obviously it's shrunk from where it was, but get something like this. It'll last you literally years. Literally years. And for $37, don't get cheap solder. Don't compromise your solder. This is very important going into repairs. So get some Kester high quality solder. Make sure that it's for electronics applications, not plumbing. So yeah, you don't want too much lead, you don't want too much tin. There's a fine balance for electronic repair. These also have a rosin in the core, so if you don't have any flux, if you're not using flux quite often, this will actually might save you because it has some flux in it. But I do always recommend flux. And also, speaking of flux, okay, so I got 2 large bottles of different kinds of flux. Now they're from MG Chemicals. This is what I use quite often. This is liquid no clean flux. It's not that sticky and you can easily wipe it off. Rosin, this flux here, rosin flux, it's very sticky. And when I say very sticky, anybody who's used this knows what I'm talking about. This does not come up. And if you get it on your hands, good luck even washing it off. You're gonna be in something. So, but it works really well. It gives you really shiny joints. I use it from time to time. Not my preferred choice. What I like to use is the liquid no clean, coupled with also MG Chemical. This is no clean flux paste. Now I think this is the largest bottle I could find at the time. I'm not sure how much these go for. I have to just post them down below. I got them off Amazon as well. And yeah, this is my go-to brand, MG Chemicals. So yeah, that's what you see when I pull up a chip. I just dip a Q-tip in there and just place it on the chip, and it comes up relatively well. So yeah, my go-to flux that I prefer is this and this. These are the 2 pairs that I prefer the most. Now this works well as well, but if I don't have either one of these, this one can actually do both both applications. I can remove a chip with this. I've in the past removed the chip with this, and I've soldered it in place. It's unfortunate that it's just so sticky. But speaking of flux, I also have these two. I got I think a 5-pack or a 6-pack of these little squirt bottles, and they work really well because you can just cover them up and store them, and they're easy. Right now it's not working with me, not cooperating. So yeah, you can just cover them up, store them, and whenever you need to use them, you could just squirt the flux on the board that you're using, and it won't drip out too much. It's relatively, you can control how much you use. And the same thing, this rosin flux, it's actually brown now because it's really old. I bought this like 3 years ago. It still works. It just changed the color. This used to be like a golden, like the color of, I don't know, like the color of cooking oil. Now it's like burned cooking oil, but it still works. It's just really old. These squirt bottles are also highly recommended if you're getting into repairs. This is another high recommendation from me. They're not expensive and they work really well. Here's another solvent that I use, just 99% isopropyl alcohol, and I refill this bottle here. Now it says 91, but I always refill it to 90 with this. And this is really good because it's a small little Walgreens squirt bottle. I think I paid like $2 for it, and you could just spray the alcohol that you want and clean the board. So I find this really handy. It's not overly large, it's small, it's like the size of my hand. It's all dirty because of like the flux and me using it every time. But yeah, this is another little bottle. You just buy 91% alcohol, and that works too on repairs. You can use 91%, that's perfectly fine. And this brand, it doesn't really matter what brand, 99% alcohol you can get. Whatever's the cheapest that you can find, that's the best. But I think at the time during COVID where alcohol was scarce, I think this was the only one that had a 6-pack of these large bottles, and I had ordered it. I think I paid a premium at the time. Now it's not that expensive, so just get a 1-gallon bottle of, if you're doing this often, 1-gallon bottle of isopropyl alcohol, 99%, and just refill a bottle like this. Or you can use something else if you prefer, but I just like this squirt bottle. Now let's get into some wires. Now first off, I think this is highly recommended if you're doing mods or any trace repair. If let's say you want to make a jump from one end to the other, this ribbon cable here it works well. It's really long, a large spool, and it's not that expensive, and this is really handy. If you don't want that, you could also, I use this sometimes. These are like these little DuPont wires, like some are male to male, some female to female, and you can connect them. I don't recommend actually making little connections in your mods because they can come undone. But let's say you want to just peel off one, solder it somewhere, and then put that somewhere, solder that somewhere, make a connection. They're okay. They're like the ribbon wire. They work for what they are. Come in a little box like this. I forgot how much I paid, but I've used this in a couple of projects. I think I used this in my Neptune. People asked years ago what kind of wires I used. They're okay. I don't use that quite often. You might not need it. Just a spool of wire might be more important than these. Also, I got some copper wire. Now this is that brand there, and this is 38 gauge. Now this is really thin and heavy. I'll never look. It's hard to even capture that on camera. It's like the thickness of a hair. Now, if I'm making a small trace repair, this is perfect. This works really well. A spool like that, it won't break the bank, but I recommend not going for a pound. Whatever weight this is, just go for a small spool. If you're getting 38 gauge, trust me, the smallest spool possible will do you forever. This will last me till Jesus comes back. This will never, it's heavy too. And also here's some other gauges. I got 20 gauge copper polyurethane enameled wire. This is also great for brakes, and it's real rigid, so it's not flexible or anything, but it does bend. Works well. Same thing here. This is just a different gauge. This is 30, can't see that, 32 gauge, and another one. Obviously this is a different gauge, 24 gauge. So yeah, once again, different diameter, but it works really well. It's insulated with the polyurethane, so it won't cause any shorts. And this is something I don't recommend. I bought this thinking that I might need it for something. This is just electrical wire kit. It's not expensive at all. It has different colors. They're all the same gauge. But I figured this would be handy sitting on the desk and I could just pull what I need. But I'd never used this, so this wasn't a great purchase. But if you're interested, I do have it, but I don't recommend it. Okay, so next we got two tools here for desoldering. Now this you're probably going to come across quite often if you're buying cheap soldering kits. You might get one of these included, and I don't recommend it at all. It's like a manual vacuum suction thing, and it doesn't work well. It's cumbersome, and it doesn't, to me, I've never liked this tool at all. I'm blessed to have a desoldering gun. And if the desoldering gun doesn't work, this is my second go-to. Just desoldering braid. It's by MG Chemicals. This is another high recommendation. If you're doing repairs, you're definitely gonna need some desoldering braid. Works really well. Get yourself a large spool, because I personally go through a lot of this stuff. And with a large spool, you don't have to keep just buying little, because they come in smaller, like 3 feet, not 3 foot, like a foot long little piece. I'll go through that relatively fast. So yeah, this is not expensive. It works well and lasts you forever. Anything that lasts you a long time is worth making the purchase, because think about it. If you buy it once, you won't need to buy it ever again. And especially if you're doing this as a hobby, and just knock that purchase off the list and you buy it, lasts forever. Same thing with the solder spool. You buy it once and it lasts you forever, literally, quite literally. So yeah, I highly recommend this. Here's another tool that I really like, and they're relatively cheap for what they are, and they last quite a bit. Now, they don't last forever, keep that in mind. They're flush cuts. So if you need to cut something real close to the board or make a cut in a wire, they have a lot of, what's that, torque or torsion. Like you could really get in and break something quite thick. And these little flush cuts, I bought a 5-pack. I've since lost one, or I've given one away. I don't remember. Like, these are still good. Usually once the tip of the flush cut gets beat up and dull, I use it for more like aggressive cuts. But when it's brand new, I can cut wires and stuff with it. But even if they become totally useless, I'll just get another pack. They're relatively cheap and they're really good. I highly recommend this. Another tool that's a high recommendation that you don't have to buy a 5-pack. You could just get one. But I personally, since I do this ever so often, I bought a 5-pack. Here's another high recommendation: assorted heat shrink tubing. So yeah, this has it's a nice little kit. It has different sizes, different diameters of heat shrink tubing, cut into small little sizes. You could even cut them even smaller if you need them to be smaller. Have a little diagram of the sizes that they are and how many pieces. I agree with this one, is really high recommended. You could even get something really wide like this. But yeah, this is another high recommendation. When you're soldering two wires together, instead of using electrical tape, which I do have as well. I don't use it often, but if I need it, I have it. But this is a high recommendation. Heat shrink tubing, please. This is one, if you're doing this, you're gonna need this. Maybe not every day, but more often than you think. Now here's Captain tape. Now Captain tape is like heat resistant, and it's like amber color. You can always tell what it is. It's really like plastic. And if you want to isolate a chip or HDMI port or something you want to isolate to desolder with hot air, and you want to protect the other components around it, Captain tape is really, really good. I don't use it quite often, as much as I should, but this is another high recommendation. If you're doing a lot of hot air rework, Captain tape is the way to go. It's not that expensive. Next up, we have a screwdriver kit. Now this screwdriver kit I actually got from Harbor Freight. So if you're out of the United States, you might not know what Harbor Freight is, but it's just notorious for really inexpensive tools. Most people make fun of them, that they make terrible quality stuff. But these screwdrivers, they've served me well. I mean, especially this one. I use this one quite often. And I think this kit was like less than $15. And it has smaller screwdrivers. It doesn't have a super large assortment of different bits, but it does have some. And it works really well. It's cheap. And I'm not putting a lot of torque on these screwdrivers. So it works really well. Another screwdriver set that I have, I don't remember where I got this, but it's a small little screwdriver set with many different star bits and specialized bits. So yeah, this one works. I use more often than I only use this screwdriver really, and this kit I use more often than not. Works well, small little hand screwdriver. And while you're at Harbor Freight, let's talk about this. Now this is a magnetic bowl. It holds screwdrivers. Obviously that capacitor is not magnetic and it's falling. There's a piece of plastic in there. And yeah, this is another high recommendation if you're doing electronic repairs and you're pulling up screws and little metallic pieces. You can put them in here. And now keep in mind, in Harbor Freight, I think this was actually free. Like, I paid no money for this because they have promotions where you spend $10 or spend $5, they'll give you a free gift. And the free gift usually consists of something that you wouldn't buy, or it's just really cheap thing, which this is like maybe $3, $4. You could get a flashlight, this, or a tarp. Yeah, I chose a magnetic bowl. This is a really good tool, and I use it all the time. It's off screen most of the time, but I do use it all the time. Also for screwdrivers, everybody has these. These are game bits. Now, if you're doing electronic repairs, I don't have to tell you about these. If you're doing repairs on video games, there's a small one and a larger one, and they're both star bits. Relatively cheap, you can find them everywhere. But I use them often. Also, here's some miscellaneous cleaning things. I use a toothbrush to clean alcohol or flux and just wipe down the board. This is a 4-pack. You can get this at the dollar store. I don't have to link anything for this. They're 4-pack, relatively cheap, maybe $1 or $2, and they're just for cleaning electronics, so it doesn't have to be the highest quality toothbrush. Get that, and cotton swabs, Q-tips, whatever you want to call them. Get a big box like this, relatively cheap. You get this at the drugstore, Dollar Tree, the dollar store rather. And yeah, I don't want to turn it over because it'll spill. But yeah, they're just cotton swabs. Good for cleaning flux or dirt, debris, alcohol. Really highly recommend as well these two. Toothbrushes for cleaning and cotton swabs for cleaning. Next, these are an assortment of tweezers. So if you want to hold a chip or you want to grip something and it's hot or something really precise, these just basically just an assortment of tweezers, different style hooks and curvatures, but they're all relatively the same. A kit like this won't run you that much. It's just standard tweezers. And yeah, another tool that I use quite often. You don't have to get 1,000 of them, but just 2 or 3 of them would work. Whatever brand you prefer. They're all roughly the same. So here's a tool I've actually used so much you can't even see the brand on it anymore. It's a fiberglass brush. Now, I'm trying to phase myself out of using this because it's very abrasive. It damages a large surface of the silk screen every time you use it. But it's such a simple tool to use, and it works well. But it does cause a lot of harm to the board. You could always use other tools, and I'm trying to phase this tool out, but I do use it. I got refills over here, so whenever you run out of the tip, because they do break. Another thing is, anybody who's used one of these brushes will tell you that the fiberglass filings go everywhere, and they'll embed into your fingers, and you'll be touching your hand or wiping your hand, washing your hands. You'll feel them, and they're not that they're super painful, but they're just annoying, and they will not come out. You go wash and wash and wash. They're like thorns all over your hand. So I don't recommend this tool anymore, but I do use it. I like it. if you must use it, then yeah, this works well. And make sure to get refills, because you're gonna run through these quite often. These things don't last at all, and a pack of refills will do you good. And to follow up with the scratch pen fiberglass brush, UV paint. So if, let's say you find a rust spot on your board and you clean up the rust with sandpaper or a Dremel or fiberglass brush, it's always good practice to cover that up with some UV mask, UV paint, and it'll, you know, protect it from any further corrosion or rust. So this is a tool. I mean, this is something I use not as often as I should, but I've since started using this. It's really good. I like it, and I'm continuing to use it going forward. So another thing that's not the top, it's not on the top of, it's not the highest importance, but it is important to an extent. Next up is more miscellaneous tools. This is a wire stripper. I used this early days of my channel a lot. Whenever I needed to pinch a wire, I could always use this tool. Now this, good luck trying to find this exact one. I can't find another one. My father got this maybe 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, and then he just handed it down to me a few years ago. So good luck trying to find this. Like this thing is pretty robust. It's not functioning as great as it once did, but it still works well, and I highly recommend. Now you could probably get a different one, or probably a better one, but this is the one that I happen to have. Good luck trying to find it. I mean, more miscellaneous tools. These are picks and little, like, I don't know what to call these. They're picks. You can have little pokey ends, and you could probably scratch up the board if you need to, or remove something off, some rust off the board. If you want to scratch up a trace, to expose a trace. As this one is not even a pick. This is like a copper brush. It's very abrasive. But yeah, I don't use this often. It's not recommended. It just happens to be in my toolbox, so I'm showcasing it here. These tools, you've never seen me use this. Now these hooks, I mean, I can see an application for this. Let's say I need to get in, let's say, a bent pin in a cartridge connector, and I need to hook under it and pull it back into position. Then yeah, I can see myself using like a hook pick like this. It's not the worst tool in the world, but I don't use it quite often. But you never know, one day I might need it. It's not expensive, so it can't hurt to have. So I just got a whole bunch of them here. Here's a product I don't use quite often either. This is Chip Quick. Now this is low melt solder. So if you want to remove a surface mount chip and you don't want to use hot air, or the chip might not be rated for high air, you have no choice but to use something like this. And I think I've used this once on my channel. I don't remember what video it was. It might have been one of the one chips, because I know the audio chips on the Super Nintendo, they don't tend to like heat too much. So when I have to pull up an audio chip, I usually use Chip Quick. So yeah, it comes with a flux and a spool of Chip Quick. Yeah, that low melt solder. So not the top recommended tool that you need. You don't really need this, but I do have it, and it comes in handy every so often. Next up is something that's not useful, not too useful, and I don't use it quite often. This is nickel conductive paint. It's by MG Chemicals. I maybe used this once in the past to just use it as a proof of concept that it works. If you want to do a trace repair and you don't want to use solder, you can't jump a trace, you can actually paint over it, and this will be conductive. Now I don't know how long that would last if you do repairs like that, but I've done it in the past, and I've used like conductive paint, and it worked. Like this is another brand of conductive paint, and we have another one. This one's actually a metallic marker, so you can actually, if you need a trace, you can just, I don't want to do it now, but yeah, you can just paint a trace. It's very thick, the brush. You won't paint the thinnest trace ever. Like that's quite large. If you're doing precision work, that's not going to help. And yeah, you don't want to use this. This is not recommended at all. I don't see many applications for this, but it is in my tools, so I'm showing it here. Next up, I got some files. Now these are really small precision files, and they're all worn down. I got to get some more. But this is good if, let's say, you need to file something off like I guess, corrosion off something, you can use sandpaper or this. Or if you need to, let's say you want to mount a jack or an RCA jack and you want to file a case of plastic. It's not really electronics repair, but more console modding, because you can't really repair anything with files. But it's in my toolbox when I do mods. Like, I've used these in the past for an Atari 2600 AV mod. So to mount the RCA jacks on the back, I had to file an opening, and these actually, it takes longer than you would think to do that, but they did come in handy, and I probably will be ordering more. I don't use these often, but when I do, I need them, and I need them to work really well, and these have been worn down already. But yeah, that's another one. Also, for wires, I forgot to mention, these are like alligator clip jumper wires. They're actually in a spool. Let me see if I can undo this. And I don't use this often, but if you want to test something before you actually solder a wire in position, or if you want to like hook this up to a power supply, hook this end to your power supply and then the other end into, let's say, or you want to add voltage, it works really well. Just alligator clips and wires. Not a tool that I use often. Once again, these are just tools that I happen to have. Just alligator clip jumper wires. Now here's a tool I don't use often. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've been blessed with pretty good eyesight. So I don't have any microscopes. That's another tool that I don't own a microscope, but I do have a jeweler's loop, and it's not gonna give a good example here. But yeah, this is a really cheap little tool. Has a light. So, sorry. So if you want to look closer, has a different magnification. Smaller one is closer. This one's a little not as close, but it works. And the light can be, I can't even see, it's shining right in my face. You can switch the light over to both sides. It works for what it is. It's a cheap little jeweler loop. I don't use it at all, but it's here. Also forgot to mention pliers. Sometimes you want to hold something with a little more force than a tweezer. You can use these needle nose pliers. I don't use this at all. I just happen to see it over in my toolbox and I brought it over. And here's another like flush cut. I like the red ones better than these, but these, like, you have to hit it head on, and sometimes you can't get in. The flush cut's more precise, so not really recommended. It's here. I don't recommend this, but I do recommend you have at least one pair of needle nose pliers, some good ones. And yeah. Now here's another thing. I like to keep some capacitors of different values on hand, especially if you're working on the same device or same style of product. Capacitors are always good to have in large bulk. And when you order, see, I order these off Mauser, so when you order large bulk, they give you a discount. So I know exactly what values I need. Most of these are for Super Nintendos, obviously, and oddly enough. And not only do you need capacitors, but also a resistor kit can also come in handy. Now they're in bags, so you can't really see them too well. Like this bag is marked resistors 10 ohm to 1K, and then you got this bag that's probably higher, 10K plus. So yeah, resistors. Those are always good for projects. I don't really recommend this. This is a box of capacitors, and they come out sorted. I did use these in the past. Most of the common ones are gone, the ones that I used. But if you need a capacitor in a pinch and you have a board that's damaged with a corroded cap or a burst cap, and you need just one, this isn't the way to go. But if you need one in a pinch, this will help. This will do the trick. It's a little cheap cap kit if you want. But as you can see, I get my caps in bulk, like a more higher quality capacitors. These are really low quality Chinese caps, but I have used them. They didn't give me problems in the past. I do have it on hand, and if I get like a rare case where I need one cap that I don't have, and I just happen to, it happens to be in this kit. So yeah, that another thing. Don't recommend it. I recommend you selecting the caps individually for whatever. It's more work, but it's more rewarding in the end. Now last but not least, mats. Now I use this silicone mat. This was the older one I had, this smaller mat, and it's really high quality. It didn't rip, or you could easily wipe and clean these mats. And I prefer these to the the blue, you know, the blue silicone mat that everyone else uses that has the little compartments for stuff, because it's like bumpy and it's small, and if you have a large work surface, you want something where you can lay things around and scatter stuff around instead of having everything dedicated to a small space on the mat. And if you put the screws or your loose little components inside the holes, they could get bumped and knocked around. I'd rather put those in something better than that. And this mat I have, it's quite large. I like it a lot. I do recommend one of these mats instead, because it's just flat, clean work surface, heat resistant, and it works really well. Plus, if you're recording videos, I think the white backdrop or the beige, it helps stand out whatever you're shooting. The blue mat's okay, but I think white is just plain. It's to the point, straight to the point, and what I prefer. So yeah, a work mat.